Good evening. My name is Rob Bates. I'm a mental health clinician working here in Quincy, Washington. I have a private practice right here out of the Quincy Hospital, and I see most of my clients telehealth. My company is Community Wellness Solutions. And at Community Wellness Solutions, we take a holistic approach in partnering with communities to address growing social justice concerns in rural communities. We hope to instill hope in those rural communities, envisioning an environment where community partners engage with the community to disrupt substance abuse, poverty, and the cycle of violence which perpetuates dysfunction. Community Wellness Solutions envisions engaging our communities, building health and wellness, helping communities cope or prevent the related stressors experienced daily. So, when we talk about mental health, what is mental health? Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. We have a continuing series which is discussing the elements of emotional health. We gave a great overview last week, but today we're going to specifically dial in on the element of self-awareness. As we go through life, we need to continue to grow our self-awareness as we go through things and make changes, and as we encounter different life stages. The first step to moving towards becoming emotionally healthy is self-awareness. When you practice self-awareness, you're able to see habits and beliefs and how they serve you and which ones do not. You can do so by engaging in self-reflection and regular self-analysis as you go through your life. Self-awareness is a form of stepping back and observing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors as they unfold. Even in the moment, we're able to see these thoughts, feelings, and behaviors as they go forward, as we have them. The practice of self-awareness, and I do call it a practice because it's a practice. We're not really good at this without really being mindful of the process and going through it. The practice of self-awareness is the practice of observing these ideas in the moment. And when we can't observe them in the moment, we observe them from a distance. Whether we know we're going to go through a situation or whether we've just been through a situation and we just want to think about how we behaved and how we want to move forward. It can be as simple as noticing emotions that you feel when you spend time with certain people, or thoughts that run through your head when you feel scared about trying something new. We all have people in our life that either make us feel a little anxious, a little angry, that we're attracted to, that we stumble when we talk to, that we just have these relationships that make it really difficult for us to interact. Our everyday relationships are very important to us. And as we go through this, becoming more self-aware of how we behave and ways that we can create more effective tools for ourselves as we go through that process, and changing our behavior to what we want it to be is extremely important. The same goes to trying something new. So often people are so afraid. They have that thought of doing something new, and that feeling of fear comes up. And they become so overwhelmed with that fear that they are too afraid to try something new. Addressing that and becoming aware of the feelings that are going on in yourself, and understanding how being afraid to try something new will prevent you from ever being good at it is part of the process of becoming self-aware. Unfortunately, we have to fail thousands of times before we can become an expert in any task. It can even be a more complex layers of awareness, how your thoughts feed into your emotions, physical sensations, and behavior. Have you ever been really anxious? Think about how that manifests itself in your body. I know when I'm really anxious, I can be short of breath. I can feel like my body's floating. I can get a headache. I can feel like I'm hungry. That's often one that I'm going through myself. I'm wondering what that's like for you. How do you feel in your body as you go through these emotions? How do we help you create that self-awareness so you can be okay? Does somebody say something specific to you, and all of a sudden you go from 0 to angry in half a second? Do you walk past the factory that's making French fries and smell them and immediately become hungry? Do you hear a song and it takes you back to a point in your life that you were happy or you were sad or you were angry? As we gain the self-awareness, it helps us move forward in our life and helps us be the person we choose to be. As we go through these moments, your body might feel heavy. You might have low energy. You may want to lie in bed longer than you want to. Understanding what thoughts, what feelings, and what behaviors bring you into this moment is important to your emotional and physical well-being. Put simply, self-awareness is shining a light on your internal world so that you can be okay as you go through your moments and as you experience your day. Otherwise, these moments may get buried, and we may not know how to handle them, and we may not know how to express them in a healthy way so that we can better meet our needs as we go through life. Meeting our needs as we go through life is extremely important. We all have a shadow. Every one of us. Our shadow is the negative things that we don't like about ourselves. As we come in ways to figure out ways to face our shadow, our lives become better. We either A, forgive ourselves and become more kind to ourselves as we go through this moment that we experience these dark or negative thoughts, or we find ways to overcome them. Overcoming our shadow is never easy because these are intrinsically the things that we don't like about ourselves the most. When we step back and we look at these things, it can often bring these feelings of self-hate, anxiety, anger, and then the behaviors that come with those, whether that be pushing people away that we love through expression of that anger, through a verbal or emotional violence, or whether that be going and eating something that we know isn't good for us, but for some reason fills that hole in our heart that we just can't fill with anything else. As we get to know these darker parts of ourselves, our inner critic is going to become louder and louder, and is going to talk about the things that are going on inside of our head, and is going to push us to be a person that we may not want to be. Or it's going to tell us to not think about the things that are making us better, because it's really hard to face these things. But the truth is, the more we face these things, the better off we're going to be. As we go through life, life is going to give us challenges. And as we've been through life, we have challenges from our past that will come up during those challenges. If we're not able to honestly and openly address these issues and meet the needs of ourselves in the moment, we may make bad choices for ourselves going forward. It is important to understand ourselves and understand our process. If you feel like you're struggling and unable to overcome these processes for yourself, then maybe it's time to reach out for help. In our community, there are many places where you can come and get help. You could start with Grand Integrated Services, the community mental health service within our community. Grand Integrated is spread throughout the county from Grand Coulee to Quincy, south to Mattawa and Royal City, and centrally located within Moses Lake. We also have mental health providers in private practice. There's a huge list of mental health providers inside of Moses Lake. But here in Ephrata, we have Nicole Prentice, Pam Dugan, and myself. With the pandemic, it has been very difficult, but we found ways to get around this. Whether that be wearing masks in session, keeping social distancing as we sit down, or working with telehealth as we go forward. As mental health providers, we understand there's concerns and very realistic reasons why we are struggling with isolation and we're struggling with real life concerns. If you feel like you're becoming overwhelmed, reach out to one of us. If this has become an emergency, please reach out to the suicide hotline. You can find this number on Grand Integrated Services website, or call 911 if it's an emergency and you feel like you're unsafe, or if you're in immediate danger, please go to the emergency room. If you have any questions, please place them into the discussion that's followed on this presentation, and we'll answer them the best we can. Thank you for your time. All right. Welcome. My name is Rob Bates. I'm here with you again from Community Wellness Solutions. I am a mental health provider here in our community. I'm a licensed mental health clinician licensed by the state, working out of the Quincy Valley Hospital. Primarily, I work by telehealth, so if you have some mental health needs and you need to talk to someone, reach out to me, and I'll give some information at the end of the presentation, which will be helpful with reaching out. Community Wellness Solutions takes a holistic approach to partnering with communities and addressing growing social justice concerns and instilling hope in rural communities. We envision an environment where community partners engage to disrupt substance abuse, poverty, and the cycle of violence which perpetuate dysfunction, pain, and trauma. Community Wellness Solutions envisions engaging our communities, building health and wellness, helping communities cope or prevent related stressors experienced daily that lead to this trauma and pain. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices in our everyday life. Today, we're here to focus on the elements of emotional health. The element of emotional health we're going to focus on today is boundaries. Emotionally healthy people know their boundaries and aren't afraid to stick to them. They know by doing so, they are not only keeping themselves emotionally safe and happy, they will be a better service to others, even if that means saying no. Boundaries improve relationships and self-esteem. You know, it's really counterintuitive to say this, but when somebody knows what your boundary is and how you're going to communicate that, they won't ask for something that they know will upset you. Or if they know that you will do something, it also gives them ability to give you that question. Boundaries help us be more helpful. Because when we have no boundaries and we give help to everybody, we have nothing left for ourselves, and then we're not left to help anyone anymore because we're out of energy. Having boundaries allows you to make yourself a priority, whether that's in self-care, career aspirations, or relationships. All three of those elements are extremely important in our everyday life. If we don't have boundaries in our self-care, like I was talking about a minute ago, we'll give to everyone else and we'll have nothing left, and we'll feel emotionally drained. Creating self-care moments and creating those boundaries to say no when you know something is going to be too much for you is the first step in becoming emotionally healthy. Boundaries help with career aspirations. If we allow ourselves to become overwhelmed at work, we won't be the most productive employer we can be, and we won't provide the best vision of the ability of us to do our work. As we learn and we grow and we become this person we want to follow the career that we want to have, if we don't have boundaries and create that time for us to study, to learn, to change, and grow, we will never meet our goals. And within relationships, if we don't communicate our boundaries, we will be in constant conflict. I say this because if you don't know how your partner feels about something, you don't know how to relate that to them. As you create a boundary and you know what they're going to say no on, or you find a way to communicate that boundary in a different way, it allows you to have a better relationship and to better engage and have a conversation at a deeper level. There's some important elements of having boundaries. Boundaries are flexible. Don't draw your boundaries in permanent ink. It's good to think about them occasionally and reassess why we have these boundaries. We could create a boundary and say, I'm only going to eat chocolate cake on Fridays. That may be a really good boundary if every time you get a little bit anxious, you grab a piece of chocolate cake and you've recognized that it's not good for your physical well-being. But practicing flexibility in that situation would be to say, I'm only going to have a piece of chocolate cake one day this week, and hold that boundary. So on Tuesday, when you just feel like you're going to have a piece of chocolate cake, or you go to a friend's birthday party, you don't have to say no. You just recognize that you're not going to have that piece of chocolate cake on Friday. When boundaries get too rigid or inflexible, problems begin to occur. When you say, I will never, that's not always true. And think about how much it hurts you emotionally and personally if that were to ever happen. That never, that infinite response is never going to be healthy for your emotional health. We all want to say that we are perfect. Unfortunately, none of us are. Boundaries allow us to conserve our emotional energy. Your self-esteem, identity, and personal well-being can be impacted, and you can build resentment towards others because of an inability to advocate for yourself. And that's the bottom line, what a boundary is. A boundary is advocating for ourselves. It's creating that moment where we can be okay. And if we can't put up that boundary, we can see so often in our friends, and very, very rarely in ourselves, unless we take that time for introspection, when we stop holding our firm boundaries and keeping our own identity. So often we enter a crowd, a group, a relationship, a friendship, our behaviors and our personalities begin to mesh. Without a boundary, we lose ourselves and we lose the things that are amazing about ourselves. We always want to hold on to that because we are amazing people, even when we don't make the best choices. Your self-esteem can be impacted when you go through that process of enmeshment. As you lose yourself, you forget what's important to you. You forget why things are important to you. And without that boundary, you stop being the person that you enjoy to be around. Always remember, those boundaries will help us conserve that emotional energy that help us to become the person that we are today. You don't need to have the same boundaries or comfort level for everyone. We all know those people in our lives that will push our boundaries and try to have more than we have to give to them. It is okay to keep a firmer boundary with that person than the person you know in your life that will give as much as they possibly can. And then it's okay to remind that person that they need boundaries as well, because we want them to be able to help us in the future. Boundaries give us space to grow and be vulnerable. If someone doesn't know what is and what is not okay with you, or you don't know what's okay and what's not okay with them, it is impossible to be vulnerable to them. It is impossible to open up about our internal world. We've all heard that common statement of too much information. Too much information about the person that's giving you that is a boundary statement. It's saying that that person is not respecting my boundaries. It's, on one hand, if the receiver is saying, I'm getting too much information. And that receiver is telling you that you're not holding a boundary that will keep you safe. We always need to remember there are some people we can trust and some people we can't trust. There are some people we can trust with more information, and there are some people we can trust with less information. And boundaries are what helps us as we go through that process. Boundaries are what help us remember who we can tell what. We all deal with complex feelings when life happens. By setting boundaries and then breaking them when the time is right, you are showing your vulnerability as you go through this process. Flexibility in boundaries is important because contradictions are normal and they're human. Every day we have things that we like or things that we don't like that we do anyways. Understanding why we do that and understanding why we let that boundary go goes back to the element of emotional health, of self-awareness. The more self-aware of why we are breaking that boundary for ourselves and what we are receiving from this behavior, the better we can be as we go forward in our life and create the amazing things we need for ourselves going in a daily basis. One of the fascinating things about becoming self-aware is realizing how much contradiction exists within you. Your perspective of the world becomes less black and white, and suddenly you notice that gray exists all around you. Remember, sometimes we can flex our boundaries, but that's only after we're really good at holding them. Be aware of the part of you that doesn't want to be self-aware when we lie to ourselves. That's not holding a boundary with ourselves. And it's counterproductive, and it's one of the biggest contradictions we can ever have. Because in truth, it is impossible to lie to ourselves. Because on some level, we know. We know what we are doing is not the person we want to be and not how we want to interact with people on our everyday life. We, as people, have the ability to make that choice and to make that change. We can't change another person's behavior, but we can focus on our own and have boundaries for ourselves as we interact with others. For most of us, there will always be a part that pushes back against the idea of being more honest with yourself about how you think and how you feel. This is part of the human condition. This is what we all struggle with, and it's really hard. Let's be kind to yourself and forgive yourself as you go through this process and make mistakes or be a person that you don't want to be. And then on days when we do make those good choices for ourselves, let's ensure we celebrate that person that we are. In the words of one of the great therapists, Carl Rogers, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I change. Boundaries are part of that change. If you find yourself struggling as you go through this process, there are many resources here in our community if you need help to establish these boundaries and figure out how to use them in your everyday life. Grand Integrated Services is a community mental health service located all the way north from Coulee City to Grand Coulee, or to Mattawa and Royal City, here in Quincy with a main office inside of Moses Lake. Reach out to Grand Integrated Services and see if they can help you. If they can't, Moses Lake has a large list of therapists in private practice. And here in Quincy and Ephrata, we have 3. We have Nicole Prentice in Ephrata. And here in Quincy, we have Pam Dugan and myself. Please reach out to the contact information provided inside of the presentation, and let's see how we can help. I know for myself, I'm seeing very few clients in person during this pandemic, with the majority of my clients being over telehealth. I feel it's productive and useful, and I feel as if we're able to connect very quickly through video chat as we go through this process. Let's try it out. If you need help, let's see what works for you. If you feel like you're in crisis now, please reach out. If you're in emergency, if you don't feel safe, call 911 and ask for emergency assistance to get to an emergency room. If you can transport yourself and you're feeling suicidal, please take yourself to an emergency room and get the help you need. If you just need somebody to talk to, look on the Grand Integrated website, and they have a link to a suicide prevention hotline where they will help you as you work through your crisis and find a way to be okay for this moment until we can find you more help. If there are any questions that you have or anything you'd like to discuss more in depth, please add it to the discussion that follows this presentation. Thank you, and I hope you're doing well. All right. So, welcome. My name is Rob. I'm here with Community Wellness Solutions. I'm presenting for the Historical Society. I'm a mental health clinician, licensed by the state, working here in Quincy out of the Quincy Valley Hospital. You can reach out to me by my email address, which is presented here, or with my phone number, which will be at the end of the presentation. Community Wellness Solutions takes a holistic approach in partnering with communities to address growing social justice concerns and instilling hope in rural communities. We envision an environment where community partners engage with the community to disrupt substance use, poverty, and the cycle of violence which perpetuate dysfunction, pain, and trauma in our communities. Community Wellness Solutions envisions engaging in our communities, building health and wellness, helping large communities cope or prevent the related stressors we're experiencing today. As we continue to talk about mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make our choices. This talk is part of our continuing series on the elements of emotional health. Today, we're going to discuss forgiveness. Forgiveness is a really difficult conversation for many people because if we have to forgive somebody, they've probably wronged us in a way that has truly hurt us. But forgiveness isn't about that person that hurt us. Forgiveness isn't forgetting about their behavior. Forgiveness is about becoming okay and letting go of that anger and that pain that are causing you to not be yourself or causing you emotional distress. Emotionally healthy people forgive. It may take time, but they allow themselves to grieve or work through any and all emotions that come up after being hurt if possible. They repair damaged relationships, but they also know when it's best to end a relationship for good. So, yes, we can forgive somebody and end that relationship for good. And this is important because we don't want to continue to be traumatized by a person that can't fix their own issues. We have to remember some things are about me and some things are about that other person. So when it's about you, we have to be introspective. We have to be self-aware and understand what's going on inside of ourselves. We have to set that boundary and say, hey, this is me. I'm going to try my best to stop doing this. I apologize, or forgive me, or if it's you, I forgive you, but I have to keep a boundary up because I don't feel like your behavior is going to change. This is the awareness that keeps us happy and healthy as we move forward. If possible, we forgive and repair relationships as they're damaged, if possible. Forgiveness is a conscious decision to let go of feelings of anger and resentment harbored toward a person who has committed a wrong. It can often help the one who has been wronged release negative feelings and achieve a sense of peace. Again, when we forgive somebody else, it's not really about them. It's about us. It's about us not being angry anymore. It's about us not feeling hurt anymore. And if we need to, we keep that boundary up. And we say, I'm sorry, until your behavior changes and you can prove it to me, we're not going to continue this relationship. But there can also be repair, and there can also be return. When we recognize somebody has changed their behavior and changed the way they interact with others, and is truly sorry for what they've done, we can allow them back into our life. And with that forgiveness, allow this to move forward. Often, the term forgiveness brings together religious concepts. Forgiveness does not have to have anything to do with religion. Forgiveness also doesn't mean that one has forgotten the offense. Rather, it's about us. And it's about recognizing it and making a conscious decision to let go of whatever that offense was. It is possible to forgive an offense without minimizing it. Someone may have done something horrible, but that doesn't mean that we can't forgive them for what they did in that moment and keep that good boundary up and move on with our life in a safe distance. There are unforgivable acts. There are people that we have to keep our distance from. I will never tell you not to protect yourself from a person that is toxic or unhealthy. But let's recognize that there's nothing that's unforgivable, and there's nothing we can't move on from, either together or apart. As we move on and we move through this emotion and we forgive, we become happier, we become healthier, and it becomes about us. Forgiveness may take time. Let's be kind to yourself as you go through that process. Just because we recognize that forgiving is healthy and it's honest and it is good for us doesn't mean that we have to forgive immediately. We go through the process. We allow ourselves to be angry. We feel these honest emotions and we let ourselves go forward. Forgiveness doesn't mean that we'll never think about this again. Forgiveness doesn't mean that we'll never have this emotion again. But what it means is we recognize that we're letting go and we're trying to move forward. We're doing the best we can because we're all human beings. And struggling with forgiveness is one of the most human things you can do in your life. The manner in which we forgive often depends on your own definition of what forgiveness looks like. Sometimes people do acts of kindness. Other people need to actually say the words. Understanding who that person is and how they forgive people, or understanding who you are and how you forgive people, is an act of self-awareness that we all need to understand. Some people may be able to forgive others by understanding why the person did wrong, often talking about the issue. Often, we don't understand why people do the things that they do. They have their reasons. They may not understand them. They may not be healthy. And they may not seem emotionally right to us. But they have a reason. And they did it. And now we have to move forward. Forgiving them gives us the space. As we understand the other person, we can empathize with where they're at. That doesn't mean we accept their behavior. It just means I understand how they got there. I understand how they're behaving. But that doesn't mean I'm okay with the behavior. We can have that boundary. It is okay to say no. It is okay to love somebody from a distance because they cannot behave in a way that is healthy for you or the ones that you love around yourself. Avoid focusing anger or sadness directed towards the person who did the wrong. It is okay to feel unhappy that that person behaved that way. And it is okay to understand why they're there. But let's not be codependent and sad for that person who just did you wrong. Remember, you're an important person too. Let's tap into your self-esteem and make sure that you're being taken care of as we go through this process. Forgive that person, but let's remember you're important too. And we always have to remember that. Forgiveness is an act of vulnerability. When we display our vulnerability to someone, we let them know that we're welcome to open up sometimes if they need to. And that's what forgiveness is about. When we forgive somebody, we recognize that we're not perfect either. We do things that are sometimes not the person that we want to be or how we want to behave. We're vulnerable to that person in the way that we recognize that it's okay to make mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes need to be made at arm's length, and sometimes we can give that person that made a mistake a hug. Either way, we can still forgive them. But let's remember, vulnerability and oversharing are different things. Shared vulnerability brings people closer together over time. Oversharing, on the other hand, can cause drama, to manipulate, hold another person emotionally hostage, or force a relationship in one direction. Oversharing is about feeling more trustworthy, more vulnerable, and more confident in a conversation with somebody than they feel with you. Bring your relationships onto a point where they have equality. Share with a person just a little bit more than they feel comfortable sharing with you. Have that vulnerability with that person and make it okay to have a deeply intimate conversation where you can discuss these things that brought you to the point where you were able to forgive them or how their behavior really hurt you. It's okay. If you're struggling with forgiveness, and if you're struggling with being wronged or holding boundaries or self-awareness, there are places where you can get help. If this has gone beyond the point where you can just talk about what's going on in your life, or just work through it with your friends or family, reach out. We have professionals that help people do this. In Grant County, we have Grant Integrated Services, which is the community mental health center located throughout the county, from Grand Coulee all the way south to Royal City, from Moses Lake to here in Quincy. There are many amazing providers at Grant Mental Health that can help you as you go through your struggles. Also in the community, we have providers in private practice, including Nicole Prentice and Alfreda, Pam Dugan here in Quincy, and myself here in Quincy as well. Please refer to the attached contact information if you need help. If you need help and you're currently in crisis, please reach out. If you're in crisis and you're having suicidal thoughts and you can't get to the emergency room, please call 911. If you have access to transportation and you're having suicidal thoughts, please take yourself to the emergency room. And if you just need help, if you just need to talk, look on the Grant Integrated website and find their suicide hotline and have somebody to talk to. Sometimes we just need somebody who can listen and hear our point of view so that we can be okay. Sometimes that person isn't inside of our personal circle of family and friends. And finding that anonymous person that's on the other side of that line helps us through that moment, and it helps us move forward. If you have any questions, or if you wish to discuss any of this information more in depth, please write some comments here down below the presentation, and we'll discuss them in future events. Thank you for your time.